I've had this top for many years, at least like over a decade, and it's one of my favorite. And it's probably because we have this bedazzled, you know, Union Jack. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome if you're new. Welcome back if you're revenant. Please consider subscribing if you like everything and anything about fashion, critical thinking, and yapping. For today's video, I want to talk about flag fashion. And this subject came about because I bumped into a dazed Instagram post last week, was it? Yeah, on the fact that the Union Jack is back, just so you know, repping the country, and it was a very interesting, you know, discussion that I mean article on the matter, and also I was thinking about the whole Katy Perry rebrand and the whole Americana aesthetic that she decided to go back to. And then the whole racist riots happened in the UK. I mean, are still happening right now in the UK. And it got me into wanting to dig a little bit more about the whole flag fashion, aesthetic and, lore that has been going on, because it's not a new thing. So I just want to see what is like fashion who are wearing, the flags. What are people wearing, like, the flags on their clothing items? And also wanted to understand a little bit more what it is about this whole, flag fashion law and just nationalism, patriotism involved in it, because there's a lot of things to say. And also like the meanings, there's many meanings behind wearing your flag, and like the history behind it, and try to understand why the flag fashion is, so attractive and appealing to many, especially fashion girlies and fashion people in general, and just the fashion world and what it means on, everyday people world. So that's what we're going to talk about. Flag fashion is not something that is new. It's something that has been existed for many decades now. It was quite prevalent with the punks in Britain, where they would be wearing a lot of garments with the UK flag on it, the Union Jack, and it was used to kind of be more of a anti-establishment and like anti-government, thing, but just trying to reappropriate the flag in a more punk way and more kind of representative way, knowing that the punk movement came from the working class. So it's something that was, mostly used for that. And then later on, it became even more popular in the late 90s with the whole Cool Britannia movement, which was about celebrating UK, British entertainment industry, creative industry, culture, and all that. And across the pond, they had something similar, but it's more something that was there since, I would say, the 50s, where the whole what we call Americana aesthetic came about. So the whole Americana aesthetic, it's about, all iconography that do represent the American, elements and American identities. So it goes from the first colonists, British colonists, getting to the Americas to today's world. And it's not only just the flag, it's going to be like, for example, the cowboys. It's going to be like all iconography about the gold rush. It's going to be like, country music and all that. All those elements over there do represent actually the Americana aesthetic. And so it's clearly something that was not a new phenomenon. It's just that, like every trend, it comes and goes because, trends are cyclic, trends have a very limited time where they exist. And so, you know, the whole thing that was interesting to me was to understand as of why, as of today, what are especially young people wearing the Union Jack in general. Like for me, the Union Jack because, Britain. And upon my research, because I also do have, this Union Jack top. And I remember I had two of them. I had like this one and I had a gray one. And the reason why I did buy this one is because I just loved it. And also because there was a time in my life where I would literally scream on the top of my lungs that I was part British, especially as someone who grew up and went to school in a non-British country and who could actually speak English well. There's always been this pride that you would have about telling people that you do speak, English, especially, when you do speak another Western language. There was always like this massive pride. And, English was because we grew up also being influenced by American culture. So English was literally this language that a lot of non-Anglophones would see as wow. So the fact that, I was part of that culture, speaking the language and understanding it was kind of a big, massive pride for me. And so that's why I was wearing, the Union Jack on me, just to let people know that, by the way, this country over here, yeah, I'm part of it as well. And I used to also have like a bracelet. One of my roommates sent me like a post the other day where there was like this Union Jack bracelet with the beads, and I remember being like, "Oh my god, I used to wear that." And so for me, it was more like wearing it as a way of pride, but also because I wanted to conceal my Africanness in a way, because I'm also part Congolese. But the thing is, I like because African countries, majority of them have been colonized, and through this colonization, and also before that, the slavery, because Black people have been seen and deemed as inferior as white people. There was this, shame that you were actually part of an African country, that you were speaking an African language. And because of that, if you could compensate like elsewhere, you would compensate with your Western identity. And so for me it was more like, now I do kind of wear it I have it now, so I just, if I choose to wear it, it's more going to be like I have it, and it's more of whatever, it's here. And upon my research, I realized that a lot of young people wearing the Union Jack were wearing it in a more irony pilled way, meaning that it's not on a very nationalistic, element and sentiment that they wear it for. It's more like it's actually a cool design, and it's funny to wear it because it can be a bit cringe. The whole cringe aesthetic is what's pushing a lot of young people wearing it. I remember during my grunge era, wearing the Union Jack was also massively huge, even in the UK, if you were living in the UK, the cringe part was more like if you live in the UK, if you live somewhere like in London, Manchester, and kind of like, adorning. Editing Ruth here to let you know that there's a word that I am pronouncing really weirdly, and I did not realize it until editing, because there's this word which I am pronouncing so wrongly. So I'm saying adorn when what I wanted to say was adorn. So just know that every time you hear me saying adorn, it's adorn. But I don't know why I, w- I am pronouncing it wrong, because I know the word adorn, which means to beautify something, by wearing it or, putting it somewhere. Just so you know, because it's a bit weird. I don't know why I'm saying adorn. It's adorn. The Union Jack was a bit cringy, because why are you wearing the national flag, just in the streets like that? It's still like today I feel like that, the whole I love Paris, like wearing it when you're in Paris, people will always be like, this is actually so cringe. But when you think of it, the whole cringe movement that came about has always been the appeal. And when you also, like everything has been cringe, and also what is cringe? I feel like that it's mostly and usually seen as cringe from the people who have been through this era, and now they're looking back and they're just like, oh my God, that's very cringe. But the new generation actually living through the movement, they don't really finding cringe. For them it's like it's part of a trend, so it's part of an identity, so it's just normal to do that. And even though you're doing that for a very ironic sentiment, still do that because everyone is doing it. And again, sense of belonging, so you're kind of following people's step. But that's actually very interesting to see that actually young people, when they wear it, is more in a very, very ironic way, and more like it just looks very cool. But they want to detach the very heavy nationalistic and problematic element that we see, that we associate with the flag. I feel like that it's it's kind of known today that like Western flags don't have a really, really charming meaning. And that's also why some young people do precise that when they're wearing it, it's more like for irony's sake. One youngster called Keelan Scott was interviewed by Dazed on the matter as to why he was wearing, the Union Jack, and he has that to say, and I quote: Keelan Scott, a 20-year-old art student at Goldsmith in London, expressed similar sentiments, saying, I like the irony of the style. I'm quite a jokey person and do think wearing something so blatantly British in London is humorous. Killen also has no time for actual patriotism, but admits they'd find it quite funny if a seriously patriotic person thought I was on their side. So again, it just the whole style of, he was talking about, I mean, they were talking about the Union Jack. The whole style is something that they just find very funny and nice and humorous to be wearing, whilst walking the London streets or the UK streets. But it's more about that and not really about claiming any patriotism, because in the quote, like we can hear there, Keelan sees patriotism as something negative, like something more like someone from the right might think that the fact that they are adorning the UK flag, that they might be also right wing, when it's not the case. And that's actually the whole issue that, the flag has been causing, especially here in the West. And I'm really precising the West because the global South, the meaning of the flags and the flowing of the flag is completely different from the West, because clearly there's a power imbalance as well. I mean, the global South has been colonized, the global North, not all countries have been colonized. Some countries have, but not all countries have been colonized. But because of the power imbalance, and because our society in the West has gone more and more fascistic over the 2, 3 like last decades, because by the way, we're not really seeing the rise of fascism. We are now in full blown fascism. We are in fascist societies, and that's just the case of it. A lot of, especially young people in the West that tends to be more left wing, don't want to be associated with the flag because, the flag on its own means empire, it means colonization, it means, all the kind of not so good things that we can associate with those Western flags. And because of that, because of this history, a lot of young people don't want to be, linked to that. Because I feel like politicians and people on the right have a really warped view of what the flag is. By that I mean is that for them the flag is just one meaning and one meaning only, and they claim that the West is so advanced and so open and so tolerant, but then when people who wants to add those different interpretations and different meanings and different identities and not like the evolving of the society, suddenly the ruling class and the people on the right don't want that to happen, but still the West is progressive and all that. For me, it's just like either you actually say that with your full chest and then admit that, okay, yes, we did something bad and we need to change it. Either you just admit that um if if the flag should keep its old meaning, it should people should acknowledge everything from the past, because everything that happened in the past still has consequences in the present. The flag today, especially like the Union Jack, but any other flags, especially Western flag, have changed their meaning, because the society evolves, there's more diversity. So the flag is going to mean different things to different people, especially to different group of people. And there's this, need for Gen Z and millennial people to reappropriate the flag with their own meaning and kind of in a way to show the progress of the flag and of the society as a whole, which the right does not want that to happen. The right wants to go back to a time where only one group of people, cis, Christian, white, middle class men, had like all the power. Gen Z and millennial, again being more left wing, want to change that. Like the reason why there's also more discussion on the many identities that exist out there is because those identities have always existed. It's just that now that we have platforms where we can actually spread wide and far and we can easily find community, of course we're going to take the opportunity to talk about it. Of course we're going to shed light on issues that still exist, especially when we live in hypocritical societies that claim to be very progressive and they're not really progressive. So it's, like the whole wearing the t-shirt as a really iron pilled moment is in that way also giving like a new interpretation to it, and validating like the many meanings that a flag can have, because it's going to have like different meanings depending on like who's wearing or who's flowing or holding the flag. And about that different reinterpretations and meanings of the flag, there's this quote from the Dazed article that says, and I quote, "Back then, the Union Jack was embraced based on genuine belief that things could actually get better. But now, even with a new Labour government, things don't seem at all seems all that positive for young people in Britain. And a reflection of that is the flag's ironic reinterpretation. As Groves goes on to say, the revival of the Union Jack in fashion is less about traditional patriotism and more about its graphic appeal and cultural reinterpretation. In other words, its meaning is constantly in flux. This then allows new generations to reclaim and recontextualize the flag in ways that reflect contemporary British identity, exactly what young people are doing today." which just, summarize everything I said on the fact that, like, whoever is wearing the flag, the meaning is going to be completely different. And there's this need to add this new meaning and these new identities and kind of reflecting on the progressiveness of the society, that is important. Hence why I've always said that Western societies are actually very conservative because they're not really happy about progressiveness and progression. They more want to keep the status quo because they don't want more people to thrive in this society. But this need of opening up to, uh, you know, more representation is important. And some people are going to use the flag, interpret the flag in that way, especially for minorities. Like, there's this very interesting dichotomy for especially people of color in Britain, where the flag has been something that we have been told for the longest time that we could not be part of that. We could not be patriotic like the white Britons. So we were like de facto completely excluded from that. And because of that, as we still grew up being British, we still feel very British. That is still part of our identity. So this need to still be part of it is like what some artists are gonna reclaim, and usually they do reclaim it in a way to show that they also are part of the zeitgeist, part of the culture. They are also making Britain what Britain is. And there's a singer, Rachel Chanuriri, who said that, and I quote, "What's cool is I'm seeing a lot of Black POC and queer people doing now," said Rachel Chinuriri, the 25-year-old pop star. Like other Black British artists such as Nia Archives, Chanuriri has incorporated Union Jack iconography into her aesthetic. And she says it's not for irony's sake. "My entire album is based around what it's like growing up being Black in Britain," says the singer. "I remember first seeing the Britpop aesthetic as a kid and thinking it was cool, but never felt like I could be part of it because I never saw people who looked like me embracing it. Once I grew up and knew why, I was determined to be part of highlighting the cultural significance of what Black people have done for UK pop culture and not allow its erasure." Appropriating it because asserting the fact that you are also part of the zeitgeist, part of what makes the country today. And another artist called Lava LaRue, um, who is a queer artist, said this about wearing some iconography of the Union Jack, which they wear quite often. And they say the artist explain how they've managed to attract the ire of both the left and right with the reappropriation of the symbol used in combination with the Jamaican flag on their Lavaland clothing line. The left, understandably, according to LaRue, take umbrage with the Union Jack's dark colonial past and morally corrupt government, while the right hate that a queer, gender non-conforming POC sports a symbol that they claim is the antithesis of those identities. But like Chinariri, LaRue continues to wear the Union Jack as a gesture of reclamation. Why should we allow it to belong to the worst of the worst, they say, when there are so many undeniably British things that deserve to rep that flag too? Grime, the NHS, our British athletes and bowlers. Is it not counterproductive to give up the symbol to the royalists and Tories? Which I would answer yes, it's quite counterproductive because there's actually a difference between nationalism and patriotism. It's well explained by an American psychologist named Linda Skidka. Yeah, Linda Skidka, where she explained that patriotism is based on an effective attachment to one's in group and has no relation to feelings about those outside of the group or the leader of the group. Meanwhile, nationalism is directly associated with us versus them attitude. And then she suggests that displaying the flag, particularly after events like 9/11, can be a result of both nationalism and patriotism, depending on whether the event produces feeling or of affinity or threat. So you see, there's actually a difference between nationalism and patriotism. And the thing is, both tends to be used interchangeably as if it's the same thing, whereas there's nothing wrong with being patriotic, because you can actually be loving your country. By loving your country, you also admit and accept its dark past and acknowledge that this happened and try to find ways in order to not only make up for that, but to truly show that you want the country to change. That's why left-wing people are clearly people who are more loving of their own country, because the reason why they want their country to admit and acknowledge like its past and its current racist legacy, it's because those people want the country to change for the better good of the world and the people and the citizens. So like the moment you acknowledge your history, you don't repeat it. When you acknowledge it, you don't repeat it. And because we live in societies where Western countries have not acknowledged their past at all, that's why we're seeing a repeating of history today. But being patriotic and loving your country is really loving everything that goes with it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and accepting that this is happening, but then all that this is happening and this happened, but also like accepting and loving the fact that now with more diversity, pushing for real change. And that's actually something that is so hard to do in today's society, because again, our ruling class does not want change to really happen, does not want progressiveness to really happen, because they see it as a losing game for them. Because if they're losing privileges, how can they exploit us more, And what they tend to do, and this is what also led to the riots today in the UK, is to fuel the right wing, and kind of trying to let the right wing know that, oh, the reason why we in shambles economically is because of the immigrants. There's this actually very, very racist view that still prevail in the West, where Western countries and Western government don't see those countries that have been colonized in the past as fully human and fully intelligent. They, like, all the stereotypes about black and brown people are still prevailing today, and today more so because the West knows that it cannot exist and it cannot be financially stable and financially wealthy without the global south. But they're never going to tell you that. But that's also the reason why the refugee crisis has been created. It's created by the West, but they're never going to say that. So they using people, especially working class Europeans, Westerners, to make them believe that the reason why the living condition is getting worse is because of someone below them, which makes no sense. The need to really appropriate what patriotism is, and that there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're doing it right and you actually acknowledging everything from the country and everything that has done, and you are here to be bettering it. And left-wing people are way more patriotic than right-wing people, because I feel that right-wing people, they are more about the status quo and keep the exploitation going, whereas the left-wing people are more about liberating people from exploitation, letting countries having their own sovereignty, and making sure that every single being do benefit from the same privileges, and the same access to healthcare, to education, to transportation. And have their basic needs covered and still can enjoy life, not what we are actually living today. Now, I talked a lot about the British side of the things, but in the United States, there's something also very similar with the Americana aesthetic, which, I think when I think Americana, I think a lot about Beyonce, because she was the recent person releasing her new country album. And you can see her, she's holding a US flag, which also stirred quite a lot of um, outrage from the left and from the right. The left were not happy because currently the United States is overseeing a genocide. I mean, let's just say that the United States is actually carrying a genocide. So this display of patriotism in a heightened period of fascism, especially at the um, core of imperialism, was not seen and is not seen as, really appropriate right now. And on the right is that the very strongly country fans can't seem to view um, black people as, part of country music, which is kind of insane when you think about it, because black people have actually contributed to country music ever since it has existed. And especially when, people are attacking a woman like Beyonce, who is a Southern woman. She's from Texas. Like, I feel like that if anything, when I think about country music, Texas, Tennessee, Arkansas, all the states that come to mind when I think about country music, because it's all about, Southern culture. I think about the gold rush. I think about cowboy. I think about Western and all that. So if anything, Beyonce is very legitimate to do so, but because right wing people who loves country music can't seem to um, accept that, black people have contributed to, that type of music, they got really pissed about that, which was another way for Beyonce to also reclaim something she has been shunned from, when she's actually also part of it. She grew up in a culture that really celebrated it. We have seen that with Beyonce, but there's also was the same thing with Lil Nas X, with Old Town Road. When this became really popular, a lot of country lovers, mostly right wing, were not happy about the fact that black queer man, I think by the time where this was released, we didn't know that he was queer, but the fact that a black queer man was doing country music and it actually blew up, and they did not want to see a black man as the face of country music. But I remember when people like Katy Perry or Kesha were adorning the American flag and really being full on Americana, nobody had an issue with that. Nobody, even though they were like, it was more pop culture, but nobody complained about that, because also I feel like that, white womanhood and Americana are like this, they're very much linked. I can't think about, Americana without thinking about, white womanhood. And that's basically what Americana is also showing a lot. It's very much Lana Del Rey aesthetic. Lana Del Rey is very Americana, like 1920s, 1930s, 40s Americana. This very old nostalgia of the American experience, the American eras and stuff. And I actually think that's maybe why Lana Del Rey is also kind of viewed as this icon in a way, because she has this very nostalgic feeling. I feel like if you look at Americana board, Lana Del Rey is always somewhere there. I always think about Born to Die album as well. Like, Lana Del Rey is just like the embodiment of Americana and nostalgia. And when you look at Katy Perry today, like I remember Katy Perry in her beginning, she was also very much Americana pin-up girly. And then today, girly is rebranding. I've seen some people like raising the issue about what is Katy Perry wearing and adorning the American flag and all that jazz in a time of heightened fascism. And that's actually a really question to ask, like how come when we getting into like the highest stage of imperialism, suddenly the people who actually benefit from the imperialism, especially when you think about Beyonce, Katy Perry, who are like multi-millionaire women who made it in the music industry, why are they suddenly, like displaying such um like pride in their aesthetic? Is a British philosopher called Kwame Anthony Appiah, who had a very nice way to define what is patriotism. For him, like patriotism in the modern world holds like different meaning because it's more of a like accepting of people's identities and including them more than excluding them, and for him it's just like this is what patriotism is, which is not really a bad thing. It's just that, because patriotism and nationalism tends to be mixed up all the time, and it's more like nationalism that people talk about. I think, Beyonce and Katy Perry are doing more patriotism than they are doing nationalism, but it's just that the flag has been seen as more nationalist than patriotic today. That, that's why people feel a bit kind of uncomfortable about the whole, displaying of the flag, especially in a time of genocide. I find it quite interesting that the Western flags and the flags from the global South are not perceived the same. I think it's interesting, but it's actually quite logical and normal. I mean, the global South has been colonized, and the West, especially Western empires such as the UK, such as, Portugal, Spain, France, they've been colonizing a lot, to the point that they've even colonized countries within Western Europe as well. I mean, we all know about Ireland. And also, you should know about Norway. Norway has been colonized by the Danes for many, many centuries before. But it's actually interesting because when we talk about global South countries' flag, we don't see it as something nationalistic, but it's more like um, showing of, you know, pride and defiance in a way, because for so long, and as I was explaining in the beginning, like for so long, immigrants have been told that they did not belong here, and also we've been through like centuries of dehumanization, and because of that, um, this a sort of shame has been put upon us where you should not be proud of being from this country. When people from the global South, they do flow and wear and show their flag, it's to kind of tell the world and to tell especially their colonizers that the reason why they're doing so is because they don't want to be intimidated into believing that they are less than, especially when you know that in many colonized countries, flowing their own flag was actually banned, and you could be prosecuted for that. For example, Puerto Rico. We're going to talk about Puerto Rico because Puerto Rico it's a American territory, but very few people know that it's an American territory because people speak Spanish over there. And it's in the Caribbean. In May 1948, there was a law called La Mordaza, which forbade Puerto Rican to fly their flag, to sing their national anthem, and to even organize for um, independence and decolonization from the United States. They could be prosecuted if they were doing so. And so, in today's era, for Puerto Ricans to fly their own flags is a way of defiance and pride, because they're still fighting for independence, by the way, because they're still not independent. And I'm really, really, really rooting for them to be independent. It's so important to understand the imbalance that there is between the global north and the global south, and the fact that the global south is still under the grip of the West. During colonization, colonized bodies were forced to assimilate into a culture that was completely different from theirs, and it's also a language that was completely different. And just all that because colonizers viewed those people as less than. The colonized body were not having it. They were like, no. And there's always been like resistance to colonization. So today, adorning a flag from the global south is not the same meaning as adorning a flag from the global north, because the global north is a tyrannical, genocidal, entities. And the global south are people who have been and who are still resisting neocolonialism, imperialism, and fighting for their own sovereignty. So it's so important to understand the differences, because the moment you understand those differences is the moment you kind of understand that yes, the meaning are not the same. And then like the fact that some people from the global south are still adorning their flag is because it's a way to let people know that we are still there and we're not leaving, and we're not going anywhere. We here and we're staying here. And also, especially for people who grew up also in the West, it's this way of reappropriating an identity and a culture that has been deemed as less than, especially when you live in the core of the racism. There's this article in Refinery 29 on, what is flag fashion, a very important and political, you know, statement. And there's this professor, Julimar Mora, on the identities. She said, and I quote, when power imbalances are visible, this enchains an instinct to emphasize cultural identity, Mora says, explaining why the flag design is so popular among Puerto Ricans in the mainland United States today. This idea of when you live in the core of the racism, in the empire, in the country that came to colonize your people and diminish your existence. The nationalism in the in the global south is completely different. It's also still linked to independence and to anti-imperialism, which is like to completely disconnect from the grip of the West and to gain full sovereignty. Whereas the nationalism in the north is more like to get rid of the immigrants, but get rid of them in a very violent and murderous way, and never addressing why the root of the problem exists in the first place. The conclusion is that, first of all, there's more than one meaning of a flag, and the meaning of a flag is not static. It changes, and it's completely normal, because as a society evolves and grows and changes, the flag also is going to mean like different things. And it's not a like the thing is, people need to understand that when people want to include an emphasis on include new identities in the meaning of a flag, it's because they want to show the progress of the society. So when you see people pushing back on that, but still also refraining from really admitting of the colonial past, or the ugly past of the country, It's just completely like antithetical from yeah, it's just like it does not work. Patriotism is really way more about like liking, loving your countries and acknowledging the entire history of the country and wanting to see the country progress and evolve, and including like all the changes that also comes with it, because you know meanings are not static. Nationalism is really about like all bigotry and all like just having this very old fashioned way of viewing the society, which is completely dumb, because a country evolves. It's not staying in the past. Yeah, it's always so weird to see people wanted to reminisce and going back into a time when we cannot go back. Like if you claim to be a progressive society, show it. It's either we progress forward or we regress and we just stay into being conservative. You can't be both. I also do think that even though a lot of people are saying that it's irony pilled way to wear it, I still think that because we are beings, human beings who thrive on collectivism and belonging, and you know we need other people interaction. um we need, you know, like wearing this, even though it might be like irony pill, it still means something, especially when I think about the fashion realm. In the fashion realm, people are wearing it for the aesthetic of it, you know, and then you know, it's still somewhere to kind of identify into a certain group, something that we are lacking. And I feel that I repeat that all the time, but we are really lacking collectivism, because we're getting more and more individualistic in this like also capitalistic society, which is actually a feature of capitalism. People do have a very warped view of what patriotism and nationalism are and think that they are the same when they are not. It's not bad to be patriotic as long as you know you're doing it right and you do acknowledge everything from the history of the country that you are so showing pride of. Nationalism is rooted in bigotry, and that's something that is so important to distinguish. And because like the moment people are going to understand that, people are going to also understand that we can also use that patriotism to change and redefine the meaning of a flag. All right, so people, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what are your thoughts on, you know, flag fashion, you know, and all that. Do you also like to wear some items? I don't know if I showed you my shorts, but let me show you my shorts. I'm wearing the shorts. Those shorts, I made them myself. I crocheted them, and it's just because I the colors go really well, and I was inspired by a picture on Pinterest. But and it's actually kind of the heat shorts of the summer. But I also thought that it was actually really fitting for this video because you know the stripes, and you know I'm talking about the United States and the Union Jack. So you know if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. This helps me a lot. Share it around. You know, the more people share about like they love for the Union Jack or whatever flag that they love to adorn, the better it is. And in the meantime, I'll see you in my next video. As always.